Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, the Auburn quarterback story heating up a little bit as TJ Finley hops in the portal. This has been a team we've been monitoring in terms of, are they going to take a quarterback in the transfer portal? The answer is seemingly day by day. Yes. I mean, you saw Casey Thompson was taking a visit. I think we've seen rumors with Payton Thorne. Before we get into it, again, just want to say thank you to you guys. The transfer portal has been wild, talking about the different prospects that hit the portal. You guys have been absolutely awesome with the support. So again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's going to be a busy next couple of weeks as the transfer portal shakes out. Dill, I'm going to kick it to you here. TJ Finley, to me, not that big of a loss. Like, if you watched the spring game, which we did, it didn't seem like Hugh Freeze had that much confidence, or quite frankly, it didn't even seem like he liked TJ Finley. It seemed like it was Robbie Ashford's job. But TJ Finley hitting the portal now, like, you need some depth and you need a proven quarterback to run this Hugh Freeze offense if it's not going to be Robbie Ashford. Dill, you have two choices here: Payton Thorne, Casey Thompson. If I were to ask you the question, you could have one of them. Who are you picking?
I don't even think it's close.
Me neither.
Casey Thompson is a far better player. In Casey Thompson dealt a pretty rough hand last year. The offensive line was feeding him to the wolves every game, and he never really had any help. But he made his plays. He did a good job extending it plays. I know he's not known as like a runner or supreme athlete, but he did a good job in the pocket, getting outside when he needed to and making plays. And frankly, that's something I think Auburn's going to need a little bit of, because I don't necessarily think the pieces are there entirely on offense. I mean, their offensive line and running back play, I think, is
got way better.
But you're still building depth at wide out. I'm sure they're going to add some pieces, but you're probably going to need your quarterback to make a few plays here and there if you're this Auburn team. And I just think Casey Thompson's a way better playmaker than Payton Thorne.
I agree. Now, I'm so confused that on Twitter you're seeing who would you rather take, Casey Thompson or Payton Thorne, if that's even a question. And I mean, we're Michigan fans. We've seen a lot of Payton Thorne, and I get it. He had that season where he throws for 3,200 yards, 27 touchdowns. I mean, that was Kenneth Walker's offense, and people were putting 8 men in the box and the throws to two guys who are playing in the NFL, and Jalen Day and Jaden Reed. He wasn't that impressive. He is a average to below average Power 5 quarterback, I'd say, and I think you saw that in 2022. And then going into this season, he was fighting for a spot at Michigan State, and quite frankly, it didn't even sound like he was winning it at Michigan State. And so you asked the question, who would you rather take, Payton Thorne or Casey Thompson? I think it's a no-brainer, and you mentioned it too. Hugh Freeze in that offense likes to put the quarterback on the move. I think Casey Thompson, in my mind, the no-brainer pick if Auburn has their pick between the two.
Yeah, and for Casey Thompson, I think you still are kind of waiting for him to get a whole year in an offense that can be somewhat effective. And again, you look at Auburn, while they definitely don't have the pass catchers they need right now, everything else is kind of in place, and you have a quarterback coach or a coach in Hugh Freeze who is as good as it gets in developing that position. So to me, there's still a lot of meat on the bone for Casey Thompson. I know he's an older prospect, but I still don't think we've really seen him get a particularly fair shake at any point in his college career, because even at Texas, for whatever reason, they just didn't seem to want to play him in that year where they were alternating him and the other guy.
Yeah, and Casey Thompson, 1 year of eligibility left. He comes in, he rights the ship. I think you win 7, maybe 8 games if you get a really good Casey Thompson and this Auburn team comes together. And then you have Walker White coming in, Holden Geriner. I know a lot of people are optimistic about maybe Robbie Ashford sticks around. And it's not even like I'm out on Robbie Ashford. You haven't seen it yet. And it's really hard to run an offense when you're just so one-dimensional.
But also, you need competition there. It's like, because right now it's Robbie Ashford and nobody. I mean, Finley, I'm not even sure was really giving him a great run at it, because, again, you mentioned it. It seemed like Hugh Freeze had made up his mind, at least in the spring, in terms of who, if it was down to those two, who he was ultimately going to go with. So now I think if you bring a guy like Casey Thompson in, that's immediate competition, and that's frankly what this team needs. They don't have a quarterback one at this point.
That's the biggest, like Robbie Ashford, even if he's going to be your quarterback one likes to use his legs a lot. And I'm not Holden is a good, a solid player. And I've heard a lot of good things from a lot of the Auburn fans and a lot of the spring practice notes. I don't know if Auburn fans feel good about him having to start multiple games this year. And so bringing in a guy like Casey Thompson, I think would make a lot of sense. And quite frankly, Payton Thorne is not a horrible ad. Like, if you can't get Casey Thompson, I think Payton Thorne's a nice consolation prize. But you look at the transfer portal in terms of quarterbacks, those are the only two options that I'm feeling really, really good about from a standpoint of they've played the Power 5 level. They're proven starters that can play high-level football.
And that's true. I mean, there's some teams you would have thought maybe would shed quarterbacks, but like obviously with the inner transferring rules in the SEC, and then frankly just not a lot of guys hitting the portal. You're kind of right. It is slim pickings when you're hunting quarterbacks.
Yeah, and what I want to talk a little bit more about is it seems like Auburn is on pace to get whether it's Casey Thompson or Payton Thorne. Like with TJ Finley leaving, like you need a quarterback to come into this roster. Where else are we going in the transfer portal? And I'm looking at a guy like Keon Coleman. So I wonder if that's an argument. I got a second question for you. You could take Casey Thompson, or you could bundle up Payton Thorne and Keon Coleman, both coming from Michigan State, and joining this Auburn program in 2023. Now, that being said, I don't know if it's realistic because it sounded like Keon Coleman was hitting the portal to avoid catching more passes from Payton Thorne. So I don't know if that's realistic, but Keon Coleman has to be a target here for Auburn as well at that pass catchers.
I mean, while there's not a ton at the quarterback spot, you actually do have some guys at the wideout position that could be immediate impact guys. I mean, Keon Coleman's definitely the number one guy who comes to mind. Obviously, they can't make a run at the guy from Florida, Xavier Henderson, but there's still other guys. I know that kid from UTEP, or is that
Zachary Franklin. I think he's the best player in the portal from what I've seen. Like, it's really rare. I mean, you have a couple. Cody Epps hit the portal from BYU. I think he's a really good ball player. Milton Wright was a super talented kid coming out of high school. Also showed that he can play at the Power 5 level, just academically ineligible in 2022. That's a position that there's a little bit more firepower. And I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think Auburn needs to go get a quarterback. I think we both all agree on that. But the wide receiver position, there's a little bit more of some riches in the transfer portal that I think Auburn would absolutely be taking a look at because, again, you saw – and, again, it's tough to evaluate that spring game because it was a monsoon out there. But you didn't feel –
he even pretty much was pretty clear that he didn't think he had the wideout core he needed.
Yeah, I'm with you. And so those are the two positions you're taking a look at. I will say, I think too many people are down on this Auburn team. I think they did a really good job. They didn't hit the flashiest guys in the transfer portal in the winter, but Dylan Wade, Avery Jones, Gunnar Britton, like that offensive line is going to be meaningfully better. You go get Brian Batty from USF. Jaquez Hunter, I think, is going to be like the one guy that's going to be a breakout. Like everyone wanted to talk about Tank Bigsby. Jaquez Hunter is a very good football player. This Auburn team is going to be able to run the football. They're going to have a good defense. If they can just get something going from the passing game, have a playmaker on the outside, I think this Auburn team, I'm not saying they're going to go out and win the SEC. I think they're going to be a lot more competitive than most people think in the SEC.
And at the end of the day, you have Hugh Freeze. You kind of did get one of the premier prizes of the coaching offseason. And, I mean, who besides Matt Rule, I think it was him and Freeze in terms of guys who'd really proven their premier head coaches in college football. So
you take Hugh Freeze's phone away from him, you take away Twitter. Like he's a top 5 coach in college football. Now with Hugh Freeze and a phone, you might downgrade him a little bit because he's sometimes a lunatic on Twitter. That being said, like Hugh Freeze, you're so right in the sense that I think people are not talking enough about Hugh Freeze being one of the best offensive-minded coaches out in the game. You look at what he did.
Best coaches. Like he did before they got let go at Ole Miss for everything he was doing off the field. He had that team beating Alabama. Like they were as good as anyone in the SEC. Maybe not good as anyone, but they were on their way to being one of the teams in the SEC that you're like, oh, they might not see Bama.
Yeah, and then you go look at what he did at Liberty. They played with Liberty last year, was a top 25 team at one point. They played with like 3 or 4 different quarterbacks. You obviously develop a guy like Malik Willis, who he just fooled the whole NFL in thinking he was going to be a top 10. Like the NFL loved Malik Willis. It turns out Malik Willis ain't that good. Hugh Freeze made him look really good. And then you look at what he did last year with Liberty. Took like 3 or 4 different quarterbacks, were just kind of plug and playing them. They were putting up a lot of points. Like the Hugh Freeze offense is going to work. I do think in the SEC it's a little bit different and he needs some more firepower as opposed to just scheme. This is a team I'd be watching in the sense that transfer quarterback, Casey Thompson or Payton Thorne, but also guys like Keon Coleman, guys like Zachary Franklin coming from the group of 5. I think Hugh Freeze is going to try to load up on some difference makers on the outside to complement the quarterback they bring in. And again, I think I'm not saying this Auburn team is going to win the SEC, but I think they're going to surprise a lot of college football fans in the sense of how competitive they can be year one under Hugh Freeze. That'll wrap it up from the boys. Again, just appreciate you guys checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Auburn fans, stay locked in, because when Casey Thompson or Payton Thorne comes to Auburn, we'll be chopping it up, talking about it. So we appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.